This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by Returning to Eden, a field guide for the spiritual journey. Returning to Eden is a book by Heather Hamilton for people who resonate with aspects of Christianity but struggle with the coherence of its claims. You can purchase Returning to Eden by Heather Hamilton at Amazon.com or at returningtoeden.com.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Damn. You have gotten yourself involved in another book club episode. This episode, the story of Noah from the Bible. This is in Genesis chapter 6. That's where it starts. And let's just start right out from the beginning. The ark isn't a thing. There was no real boat. There was no need to get in a helicopter and try to fly around and find something like that. There are claims that you see all over the internet and TikTok and YouTube saying that they found a boat on Mount Ararat, and it's going to be, no, it's not. There is no need. There's no need to find an actual ark, an actual boat outlined from the sky, nothing like that, because the ark isn't a thing. This is not a literal story. And in fact, if you even tried to make it a literal story, there wouldn't be enough biodiversity on the ark to repopulate the earth. I mean, we just have to stop with that. We got to stop, okay? Also, please don't tell this story to children, but we'll get there in a second. One of the things that helps us let go of this need to be literal with this story is when we recognize that it's not a unique story. There's a story of Ziusudra where same thing, the god is angry and God's going to wipe everything out and start over. And then Ziusudra makes an ark, like a boat and the animals and the whole thing. It happens again in something we have called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And all of this is to say that this is not a unique story in the sense of nobody has ever heard of this happening. This is a story that is a common tale told all throughout that part of the world over and over in lots of different ways with lots of different permutations. And it means that because it's told in different cultures, each time it's told, it has something different about it because there's a purpose behind the telling. There's something unique that's in this story that the storyteller is trying to communicate. And so we're going to get into that in a little bit because there are some things in here that are unique and push us beyond a 21st century reading of this to something deeper, because that's what the book club episodes are all about. We are going to try to understand the ancient cultures, to understand how the original people who heard these stories understood them, so that then once we can lift off that ancient culture and understand what they believed, how they read it, that helps us say, okay, so now with that understanding, how can this story help us be the best version of ourselves? How can this story help us find a purpose greater than ourselves? How can it be a living and helpful spiritual text for us? So let's get into it, right? This story begins in Genesis chapter 6, and which is right after the story that we find Abraham, of Adam and Eve and their descendants. And we get here and it says, when people began to multiply on the face of the earth, daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took wives for themselves that they chose. And what appears to happen is that there are some divine beings of sorts that have relations with the women, with the human women, that produces this race called the Nephilim, which is like giants, and it makes God mad. And what's really interesting to me is a way that it talks about God in this passage in the beginning of chapter 6, because it says, the Lord God saw that wickedness of humans was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their heart was evil. Every inclination of the thoughts of their heart was evil continually. Side note, the locus of the person of the consciousness was not in the head, like we think in a lot of Western cultures. It's in the heart, right in the center. And so the thoughts of their heart is a term that is like the ideas that came from the center of them, of who they were. The thoughts and inclination and thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. So you've got this word heart here, that the hearts of the people were evil. And then it says something about God that is, I don't know. It's beautiful. It's tragic. It says, and the Lord was sorry he made the humans on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. I've always found this double beat of a heart here in verses 5 and 6 of chapter 6 as, I don't know, I think beautiful may be the closest word that I have. Because the wickedness, the evil in the hearts of humans hurts God's heart. Remember, heart is the locus of the person. You might say humans were evil to their core, and it hurt God to God's core. Yeah. There's pain in God's heart. And it's like this, you remember from the story of Adam and Eve in episode 3 of the podcast, that one of the consequences of the humans choosing to do the wrong thing was that their relationship with God was broken. And we see that the relationship with God was broken, the relationship with each other was broken. But here we see something, I don't know, that moves me. Because the brokenness in the relationship between man and God, humanity and God, doesn't just hurt humans. Here we see that this brokenness in the relationship with God hurts God, right? To God's core. It grieved God to God's heart. And that's something that you don't hear a lot in the ancient world. Gods get angry. Gods don't get hurt. And so right here at the beginning, we start to get a sense that there is something different going on with this story. So humanity is evil. Humanity is evil. They're hurting God's heart. And he says, but in verse 8, but Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord, right? Because God says, I'm going to blot out all the humans. I'm going to press reset. This is the story of these, of these other narratives. God gets mad and God's going to blot them out. And then it says, but Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. And God decides, okay, eventually we're going to use Noah to get a do-over. And then, so God instructs Noah to build a boat. And there are very, very detailed instructions about how to build the boat. Not super detailed, but detailed enough for us to know exactly how big it is. And we know it's not big enough for what the story says about it, right? Supposed to bring 2 of every animal on the ark, except for the clean animals. Then you're going to bring more of the clean animals, because you've got to have more of those. And it's not big enough. It's not even close to big enough, which is part of the problem with these stories, with treating the Bible literally and imposing 21st century values on them, is you just come up wanting, right? This is not a science text. We talked about that a little while ago, but this is also not a historical text in the sense of modern day history. The values of modern day history are very different than the values of ancient history. And this isn't really even intended to be an ancient history. This is a story, an epic. This is like the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is like the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is a story that is not meant to make you think of an actual person, but to tell you something deeper than a history of an actual person might even be able to tell you. So we're in chapter 6. God tells Noah, I'm going to rescue you. You're in the middle of the desert. That's fine. Build an ark. And then after God gives Noah all the instructions, we get an important attribute about Noah. We get this little brief comment. Verse 22, Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. I love this. This whole story is about Noah and how amazing he is. God gives him all the instructions, and Noah gets? Noah did it. It's so matter of fact. It's so simple. It's so simple that it's almost something that you can miss, but it is. Noah is putting into the flesh, into his body, into action, the instructions of God. And this is an important thing to not gloss over, because when it says that Noah was a good guy, we don't get a lot of stuff about how, like, what made him so great. We get this. After all the instructions, verse 22, Noah did this. Noah did this. That's it. But that's important because it's saying that Noah acts on the things that God tells him. Noah takes the good things of God and brings them into reality, into the world, into the flesh, into the physicalness of the world. That's who Noah is. Noah takes what God has asked Noah to do and creates it out of the stuff that God has given Noah. And that's pretty beautiful. And then we get to chapter 7. It says, the Lord says to Noah, go into the ark and your household, for I have seen you alone are righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all the clean animals. We get all of that. And it says, Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came on the earth. Now, Noah was not 600 years old. Also, Noah was likely not an actual person. So if we're talking about not an actual person, then the actual years of their life don't super matter. But there is symbolism in numbers. There's a lot of symbolism in numbers in the Bible. And if you want to play around with this symbolism, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of things. I think my favorite one is, this is right after the story of creation, right? And if you remember, just a couple of episodes ago when we talked about the 7 days of creation, and we also reminded everybody that the earth wasn't created in 7 days, that humanity was created on the 6th day. And so what we have with this idea of Noah being 600 years old, it's one of the ways you can read that symbolic age is to say, oh, Noah is the best of humanity. Noah is the ultimate human. Noah is the person who is showing us how we should be in this really messed up world. Which, it's not a bad interpretation of his age, right? Not a bad interpretation of the story itself. The story that they are living in a world that is really awful, really horrible. There is all kinds of corruption. There are all kinds of things that shouldn't be happening. There are all kinds of people in power that shouldn't be in power. And yet, in the midst of that completely messed up world, it is possible to do what you feel like is right. To be the good person that you think you should be. It's possible, even in a completely messed up world. Noah, the ultimate human, the mega human, the one 600 years old when the floodwaters come. Noah's our example. Noah did this. Okay. We are in chapter 7 still. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. And Noah, with his sons and his wife and his daughters and everybody, get into the ark. And says, on the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. Now, remember, when we talked about the way that the earth was created, when we talked about the creation story, we talked about how they understood that how the earth was. The earth was flat. The earth was setting on pillars and on top of this great mass of water. And that when that water came out, chaos ensued, and that's what happens here. This is the idea that the flat earth is there, the waters underneath it. That's what everything is. Waters all the way down. And the waters burst forth. The waters open up. And when that happens, I mean, all hell breaks loose. Like that, it starts flooding everything. And if you read this through a more modern lens, man, God does not look good here. This is xenocide, right? This is a horrible, horrible thing to do. All the animals, all the people die. And it's God's fault. Like, God kills all of the people and all of the animals, except for just a couple on a boat. And let's be honest, in the 21st century, this kind of thing is not okay. And this is why we should not just be telling this story to children. Like, this story of God getting angry and killing everybody, it's not something that happened. B, it is a nuanced story that by the end of it, we will come to some helpful meanings out of the story. We will get there, but the meanings are deep and profound and require a nuanced reading of this and an understanding of ancient cultures. On the face of it, to a child, the whole flood story is traumatizing. That God at some point just could decide, I'm going to kill them all. we're just going to press reset, do over, whatever. Like, we're done. I'm done with these people. That kind of a God is like, I don't know, this sort of homicidal, xenocidal, genocidal God. Like, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. And for children, this is scary. I mean, we don't let kids watch scary movies. Why are we painting the ark on the wall of the children's ministry room in churches? Right? The story, oh, hey, kids, as we walk by, just remember that God will kill everyone. This is not a PG story. It's not a PG-13 story. This is an R story, and it's R for violence. And the flood is total and catastrophic. Everything gets wiped away. And it rains. It rains for days and days and days. But not just any number of days. This is actually the first place we see this in the ancient spiritual text of the Bible, the book of Genesis. In verse 12 of chapter 7, it says, the rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. If you read through the Bible in different places, you will see the number 40 crop up a good bit. And it's also often in this kind of a moment, in a tragic moment. The number 40 is it's symbolic. The number 40 is when somebody is being tried, when there is a test that is happening, when there's judgment that is happening. And the idea is it's symbolizing something hard out of which something good is going to come. The idea that if in the midst of an completely broken universe, you can hang in there, something good can come out of something as horrifying as xenocide. Which, on most days in my life, is the kind of hope I need. My life is not easy or simple or always great. It's often painful and sad and humiliating and all kinds of things. And in my best self, when I am believing that God exists, when I am remembering that the Bible has messages that it can tell me, when I have the presence of mind to actually be centered and in my spiritual tradition, my ancient spiritual text right here, I will think it's 40 days and 40 nights. This is hard, but it will end. And 40 days and 40 nights feels like forever. What I'm in, what I am processing, what I am dealing with, the difficult season of this life, it's feeling like it is going on forever and ever, but there will be an end. And I need to hold on to hope that out of this devastation in my life, something good can come of it. That's the Noah story. We're going to see that in a minute. But it's also something that I hear from other people, like people who are really spiritual, the people who I respect. They will tell stories of horrible, horrifying things that happened in their life and how at the end of it, something good came out of it. But let's not go too far down that road, because just because something good can come out of it doesn't mean that it was a good thing in the beginning. And I will be honest, killing every animal and every human is not a good thing. But if that's what's going to happen, at the end of it, there can be something good. The bad thing is not the end. And in this story, we have this sort of bad thing happening. And then it really is now a beginning. Because eventually it says that the waters recede. It says they were in the ark. In verse 24 of chapter 7, the waters swelled on the earth for 150 days. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And then it took 150 days for the earth to dry out. And we see this moment. There's the chapter 8 where it talks about the waters, the flood subsiding. It's very beautifully written. It builds suspense, right? We're going to send a bird out. We're going to come back. No, we're going to send a bird out. Come back and it's not ready. And then it says, Noah, still in the 600th year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked and saw that the face of the ground was drying. And then it was dry, and then God said to Noah, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you all of the living things, all the birds and animals and all the things, and so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. This is an echo. You might remember in the creation story, in chapter 1, verse 20 and 22, there's this same phrase, be fruitful and multiply. We have the same kind of language here, that God is asking humanity to do the same thing God has always asked humanity to do, to care for the earth, to be fruitful and to multiply, to fill the earth. But this time, please, can we fill it with something other than evil? So God says to do that. And the very first thing that happens is that Noah built an altar to the Lord and took every clean animal and made offerings on the altar. And it was pleasing to God. So the very first thing that Noah does after all of this is to make an altar and to make sacrifices. This is not unusual or unique in the ancient world. This is assuming that God is angry. So these are the stories, right? The other stories of the other gods is that the gods are always pissed. The gods are always mad at humanity, and they're always finding moments and ways to smite them, right? Gods are always trying to wipe everybody out. This happens over and over in all these other stories, all these other faiths. This just repetition of God is mad, you've got to deal with it. And that happens over and over and over again. And as soon as the punishment, the madness of God happens, you build an altar, you sacrifice an altar to try to get God to be chill again. And then something really interesting happens. Something that is very different in this story than in the other stories like it of this time. Chapter 8, verse 21. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing odor, the Lord said in his heart, again, the heart is the locus of the person, right? In his core, in the center of who he is. God said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of humans, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth. Nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. This is a big deal. This God is saying, I am not going to be one of those gods. I am not. Yes, people are awful, right? The inclination of the human heart is evil from its youth. Yes, people are awful, but I'm not going to destroy the earth again. I'm not going to do that. And then he steps up to Noah and does something that gods don't do. God makes a covenant with Noah. A covenant with where like an agreement that assumes that God is tying God's self to humanity in a covenantal way. And on God's side, God is saying, I'm not going to destroy the earth again. Okay? And it says in chapter 9, verse 12, this is a sign of my covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. This is a covenant with all of creation. For all future generations, I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every little living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. Now, we call it a rainbow. Here it's not called a rainbow. It's called a bow. And because we call it a rainbow and we see them, we will read this and think, oh, this is the rainbow. But that's not the symbol here. The symbol isn't bow. It is a weapon of war. It is the weapon at this moment, right? It's leading arms technology at the moment in which this thing is being written. And the idea is when you are not using a bow, you hang it up on a wall. And so the symbol here is God taking that bow, taking God's weapon and hanging it up on his wall, which is the sky, and saying, no, I'm hanging it up. I'm giving up being at war with humanity. I'm not going to do it anymore. And that is something different. Remember, we started this podcast talking about how there are lots of different versions of the Noah story, right? There's lots of different versions of this in all different cultures around this area. And that's normal, right? That's the way it goes. That's the way we get all of these stories. These stories in the Bible, most of them are not particularly unique, especially the ones that aren't talking about some specific battle somewhere, right? The big stories are stories that have been told over and over again throughout that time, throughout that region. And they're part of the canon, right? The canon of that era, of the way they made meaning of life and of difficult times. And floods were hard, right? Floods were hard because there weren't kiln-fired bricks. And so when a flood happened, you didn't get rubble, you got mud. You came back, there was nothing left. You have to make sense of that. When that kind of destruction happens, you've got to make sense of it. And they made sense of it with these stories. And these stories echoed the values of their religion. And the stories of their religion were that the gods were angry all the time at the people. And you just got to watch out. You've got to appease the god, or the god is going to wipe everything out. God's going to do that over and over and over again. That's the story that's told in those cultures. That's not this story. In many ways, the point of this story is the difference that this story has between the other similar stories. The difference that this God, yes, this God has a temper. Yes, this God is angry. But this God has said that they're not going to be at war with humanity anymore. They're hanging their bow up. They are getting out of the war game. And as they do that, they don't just say it. God makes a covenant, an agreement with humanity, with actually the whole earth, but with people. God makes a covenant with people. And this is the first of multiple covenants that you see in the Old Testament scriptures. But a covenant is an agreement around a specific thing, but it's also an agreement to a relationship. And so we see a God who not only says they're not going to destroy everything again, it is a God who says, I am wanting to be in a relationship with you. Even though earlier I recognized that the heart of humanity is evil from its youth, I still want to be with them. And I will enter into a covenant that they will break, but I will not. And I will have this relationship with them. This relationship that will last. So I told you, the ark isn't a thing. The ark isn't a thing that ever existed. And to focus on that is to miss the entire point of this. And to be honest, it is funny to me that people who want to get on helicopters and look for boats in mountains and decode it like they're looking at some sort of journal in an Indiana Jones film, they act as if they are the ones that are serious about the Bible when they are completely missing the point. And not just missing the point, missing the whole genre. This is a spiritual text. This is supposed to help you understand who you are, who God is, and help you become the best version of this is supposed to be a spiritual text, not some sort of map, not some sort of treasure map that you're going to, find the way that you have immortality. So to act as if the ark is a real thing and to spend your time on that is just to completely miss the point. Which brings me to the ark encounter. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. You should Google it. It is weird and it is wild, but somebody, a group of really not great investors paid for this, amusement park. There is an ark, a life-sized ark built in I think it's Kentucky somewhere. And it tells the story of Noah, and it's also full of creation pseudoscience, right? And the dinosaurs being on. It's wild and insane, and but the ark encounter misses the whole point. There wasn't a boat. There's no reason to recreate a boat because there wasn't a boat. There wasn't all of the animals of the earth destroyed. There wasn't a global flood. There is no geological evidence for a global flood. So we don't have to look for it because it didn't happen. And when we do that, when we spend our time, we miss the point. The point is that when you get 40 days and 40 nights of really hard stuff in your life, and then at the end of the 40 days and the 40 nights, it takes 150 days for the results of that 40 days and 40 nights of pain to recede. Something new can happen. And if you can remember it in the middle of the 40 days and the 40 nights, or the 150 days of its aftermath, maybe you can have a little bit of hope. And maybe when you see someone going through their 40 days and 40 nights, or sitting in the midst of the 150 days of the aftermath of the 40 days and the 40 nights, maybe you can be the person that reminds them of the rainbow and say, this is really hard, but it will end. And I'm going to be there with you, right next to you. I'm going to be in the ark with you, waiting for the floodwaters to recede so that we can walk out and we can start something new together. You missed that if you're trying to turn this into Indiana Jones. Remember how I said this was a book club episode? Well, the book club doesn't work without the actual club. We have this wonderful group of humans that listens to this podcast, and we'll talk about it later in our Discord server. It's a server that we call Not Church. One of the people in there said it's like church without people yelling at me and telling me that I'm going to go to hell for what I believe. It's a group of people that are interested in spiritual things, that want to talk about how they try to connect with the divine, with God, with the universe, whatever. And we explore ancient spiritual texts like this one and other ones. This is the one we're doing right now. And we try to find beliefs that work for us. By that, I mean beliefs that help us be the best version of ourselves, and beliefs that help us find a purpose greater than ourselves. And if you want to be part of that, you can just go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. That's patreon.com/skepticpastor. And $3 a month. That will get you access. It's like $3 a month. Right? It's a subscription because we don't ask people to give us 10% of anything or any of that. This community, you pay for what you get. And if at some point it's not working for you anymore, it's okay. You just stop paying. And I hope that you join us because this community is beautiful. We have post memes. We post the hard things in our life and hold space for each other. It's really great. And if you've been looking for a community like that, Not Church is really what you are looking for. And all you have to do is go to patreon.com/skepticpastor, and it will get you into that wonderful community. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.